This is Inside the Right. Tim, Donald Trump's latest press conference was a dissembling mess. Look, he has one job right now, and that is to expand the reach of his coalition. You worked in Republican politics for a very long time. That's why we do this series. Did he accomplish his goal of being able to bring anybody who wasn't yet voting for Donald Trump into his coalition by virtue of the meltdown that we saw at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, he accomplished his goal. It just isn't the goal that you think it should be, or that any smart strategist would think it should be. His goal was to get the TV to talk about him again. It's as simple as that.
Right.
He is unhappy about the attention that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are getting, about the momentum they have, about their crowd size, and Stephanie Grisham, who's a former press secretary for him, I think said this very aptly. She was like, "Look, I lived through this. My experience when we weren't in the news, when the news wasn't good, he wanted to just go out there and, do it for himself." And she said this press conference feels exactly like that. That's his style. He's tabloid, New York to the core. He wants to be on the front page of Page Six, and he did it today. He achieved that. He's on the front page by saying that his insurrection was better than Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. I don't know that that's going to appeal to anybody that he needs in Georgia, but he's back in the news.
Well, talk about the dichotomy of these two things, because you've got him getting attention, which seems to just be his life goal, but then also the fact that he has a campaign to run right now. So at what point are those things actually in conflict with each other? At what point is him getting more attention and showing more people just how much of a lunatic he is actually hurting the campaign overall?
Yeah, they're in conflict right now in the general election. It's just sometimes it's hard to sink in for people, and I understand why. Because in Republican primaries, the more attention he got, the better. Republican primary voters like the crazy. Like, they don't actually even care what the substance of the remarks
Right.
were. Like, they like that Donald Trump is owning people and attacking the fake news and saying that they're crying and whatever it was that he's on that day, they like it. They want more. Okay, not every single Republican voter, but a majority of Republican primary voters like that. So it helped him in primaries. It also people think that it helped him in 2016 because he was getting a lot of attention. There's the famous, CNN at the empty podium live streaming his speeches, and some of that was irresponsible. But the thing people don't really kind of remember and realize is the only election he's actually won, when he still lost the popular vote, but the only election he's actually won against Hillary in 2016 was the last 2 weeks. Hillary was the one that was in the news because of the Comey letter. Right? Like,
Right.
it wasn't Trump's crazy stuff. Like, Trump's Access Hollywood thing got washed out of the news by the Comey letter, by the last debates, and then Trump, for Trump, kind of behaved for the last week and a half, and all of the data shows that the double haters of 2016 broke to Trump in that last weekend, and we can't say for sure what it was, but I think a big reason for that was that he was out of people's faces.
Right.
These swing voters, general election swing voters, don't like him, and so I do think that his need for this attention is in conflict with his goals in the general election.
Right. And so, from my perspective, and I'm sure from your perspective over at the Bulwark, I know there are still some people of the camp that, you shouldn't give him a platform and you're doing what you did in 2016 by virtue of showing everybody who he is. But I think it's the absolute opposite right now. I think it is incumbent upon us. I think we have a moral obligation right now, which is to say nothing of the electoral obligation and a political obligation, to broadcast him on a daily basis so that people remember what he was like. We live in the TikTok era. People do have short memories right now. And so you forget the chaos and the lunacy that just enveloped us on a daily basis when Donald Trump was president from 2016 to 2020. And I think reminding people of that just by showing them these press conferences that against anybody's better judgment they would say not to do is going to ultimately help us in the end.
Yeah, in addition to people having TikTok attention spans, some of the voters who were on TikTok were 11 when the Access Hollywood
Right.
tape happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some of them need to learn about this stuff. So I am totally with you. I think obviously there's some limits to this. There was one example from this election cycle that stands out in my memory of when CNN gave Trump that interview with the live audience that was cheering for him.
Yeah, they just
And he kinda
filled it with just it was like Jeffrey Clark and his family in the front row.
Yeah, exactly. It's just this MAGA town hall. Okay, that's bad. All right, you don't want to do that. There's obviously limits to all of these principles. You want to fact check them. You want to have certain limits. But people need to see him And people need to remember what they don't like about him. That is I agree with you, both a moral and an electoral objective for people in the media or advocates that want him to lose. And I think it's really kind of hard to argue with that. But if you just base it on the data.
What about what do you make of him proposing 3 debates now? Do you think that the humiliation of him being called a chicken when the guy's sole self-purported virtue is the fact that he's some strong man? Do you think that him being called a chicken finally got to him?
Yes. I always thought he was gonna have to debate. I never bought this idea that he was gonna duck these debates. Every interview I've done, I've said that. There was no way he was gonna let his manhood be challenged by ducking a black woman. Like, he feels like he's got to do it. He really believes his own BS. Like, he thinks she's dumb, and so his ego was never gonna let him skip it. So I always thought he'd do it. I always thought he'd do one. I think the fact that he's suggested 3. There are 2 observations. One is he thinks he's behind, and they've I think accepted that Kamala Harris is now leading this campaign narrowly, right? But if he felt like he was winning, like if he believed his own BS about, oh, the polls are rigged and I'm really winning by a whole lot, then he would do what he did in the primary,
Exactly,
which was not
and he
debate.
just wouldn't show up. Exactly.
Yeah. So he thinks he's losing. So I think that's one thing that we can say for sure. And then, I don't know. I think that he also feels good about the Biden debate, and I think that he thinks that he can beat her. And so I think that's the other reason that he's suggesting more. And I will just kind of, to revise and extend my remarks from earlier, the debates are one of those exceptions to this rule about more Trump is better. Again, I think seeing Trump unadulterated is better. If there are going to be 3 debates in the style of no audience, where there's strong moderators that are going to challenge him, like I'm for that. I would not be for Kamala accepting a debate like where the Fox people are moderating and they're in a stadium. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like this, so there are limits to. I think this more Trump is bad for him, but generally speaking, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. I guess the vice president said she would do the one that they had agreed to and would look into the subsequent one. So to me, it seems possible. Maybe even, I might even go as far as to say likely that there's going to be 2 debates.
Yeah, I mean, her saying that she'll do the one and she'll consider whether there's going to be subsequent debates after that is a testament to that now she is the one in the position of strength where she's saying, I might go or I might not, which is exactly where Donald Trump was, to your earlier point, in the primaries. I do want to ask you about the prospect of whether or not Kamala should really do that Fox News debate, but real quick first, just for those watching right now, to support the work that Tim and his team are doing, which is especially important right now because these are former Republicans who know how to speak to Republicans and independents and conservative Democrats so they can give a permission structure to these people to make sure that they know that you don't have to go out and vote for Donald Trump just because you've been a Republican in the past. So to support the work that they're doing over at The Bulwark, which has never been more important, please make sure to subscribe. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Tim, the prospect of a Fox News debate. My position on this basically is that there is no planet on which Kamala Harris should reward the network that was forced to pay almost $1 billion for lying on Donald Trump's behalf to then host a debate where Donald Trump himself is a candidate on that stage. In addition to the fact that the last time they hosted a debate, which was, I believe, when Ron DeSantis went up against Gavin Newsom and Sean Hannity was beating his chest about how he would be this neutral arbiter, it could not have been more of a 2 versus 1 match if he tried. I mean, him, short of Hannity standing next to Ron DeSantis at the podium, it was the most lopsided debate performance I've ever seen in terms of like where the moderators stand. So what do you think in terms of, and I presume that's what would happen again because it's Fox. And I mean, even if they do choose somebody like Bret Baier, which was a name that Donald Trump threw out, Bret being the best person among bad people does not make you a good person. Bret Baier was one of those who said that in the 2020 election, they should claw back Arizona's electoral votes and put them in Donald Trump's column. This guy is not some neutral arbiter. He's not some fair journalist here. He might put a better spin on it and maybe is less egregious than Jesse Waters and Sean Hannity and Judge Jeanine. But that doesn't mean, again, to my earlier point, that he's good.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a bad pundit on this one. You're supposed to have a very strong opinion like you do on this, and I'm like kind of torn because of the because of the Gavin DeSantis example you gave up. So, on the one hand, it was totally biased. I agree. And it was totally lopsided. On the other hand, Gavin kind of got points for going into that, right? Because like people knew it was lopsided. And I think that, he got some credit for being able to go in there, defend his points, make compelling arguments. And there were a lot of people on like our at the Bulwark, we were praising him. I'm sure you
Yeah.
guys were too. So I don't know. I wouldn't say it's definitely a slam dunk. I would want some very stringent rules. Probably, better safe than sorry and not do it for me, but I'd be tempted to do it. Maybe if it was a different situation where she was losing, I would be even more tempted, but I would be at least tempted to because I do think that she might just kind of get some points for showing up if you believed that the moderators would be like even in the ballpark of fair, but that might be a risk that's not worth taking really
Yeah.
when push comes to shove.
Well, that's fine. There are no pundit rules on this show. This is you can have you can have any even if you're neutral on something, that's totally fine. That's still allowed in a more nuanced space as the internet is known to be. With that said, of course, we will stay on top of all of this, whether it's from debates or the continued dissembling from Donald Trump in any more emergency press conferences that I'm sure he's doing to the dismay of Chris LaCivita and Miss Wiles there over at his campaign. Again, for those watching right now, to support the work that Tim and his team are doing at the Bulwark, please make sure to subscribe. I'll put the links right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Milelr.
This is Inside the Right.